online activities from Islamist actors are, of course, constantly evolving and influenced by lots of different geopolitical developments. And it is, of course, therefore important to be aware of all the different developments in terms of the narratives, the platforms, and other online trends. And also, particularly, given RAND practitioners' focus, is how does this influence practitioners working in the field? And today we're going to discuss through two excellent speakers contemporary online Islamist extremism. And we have two excellent speakers, Mustafa Ayad from the Institute for Strategic Dialogue, ISD, based in London, but also in other cities. And also Camille Antunes from Europol, who will share their findings with us today. So we're very fortunate to have, on the one hand, understanding the sort of archipelago or the online extremist ecosystem. And I know that Mustafa Ayad will speak about that. Also the influence of COVID-19, how different platforms are utilized, and the different social media networks. And then on the flip side, what do we do about this issue? And there is, of course, no other agency perhaps better equipped than Europol through its Internet Referral Unit, the EU Internet Referral Unit, that focuses on what are then the challenges for law enforcement. How do they assess the threat of a constantly evolving online behavior by different actors? How do they attribute that? And I know that Camille Antunes will discuss the modus operandi of Daesh until 2019, different referral operations that have taken place in 2019, that is being taken place as we speak, and also ISIS or Daesh media dissemination after 2019, and the various challenges for different law enforcement agencies and operations. So we have both sides, and I cannot think of two better speakers than Mustafa Ayad and Camille Antunes. Let me just say, as I said before, a very brief introduction to them. Perhaps they want to say a few words themselves about their backgrounds, if I'm not comprehensive enough. Mustafa Ayad is the Institute for Strategic Dialogue's Executive Director for Africa, Middle East, and Asia, and the lead on online Islamist movements, subcultures, and groups. We also have Camille Antunes, and she's representing European Counterterrorism Center as a specialist focusing on online terrorism content, social network analysis, and CT online. I'm not going to go through what the Internet Referral Unit is. I'm sure that she will do a better job than me, but I could not think of two better qualified experts to speak on this issue, this complex issue. Just also before we start and hand over the word to Mustafa, I want to say a few words about some practical notes. Please use the Q&A function to write your questions, direct them to all, and the chat for any technical matters that might arise. You'll find that on the right-hand corner. And from the RAND practitioner staff, we have Lieke Wortze, Fenna Cantors, and Martin Brede, and they are assisting this webinar. They put together excellently the program for this. And at the end of the webinar, participants are kindly asked to fill in our survey. So please note that this webinar is being recorded. And with those words, because I know we have a lot of things to go through and say, I want to hand over the floor to Mustafa Ayad, who will speak on the evolution of online Islamist extremism propaganda. So the floor is yours, Mustafa.
Thank you, Magnus. Thank you, Ran, and thanks for all the participants who are joining us from wherever you are. I'm sure taking out the time today to listen to us talk about this incredibly important issue is obviously it's eating into your time as practitioners. So let me just start a little bit about what I do, what the Institute for Strategic Dialogue does. So we've been tracking and monitoring and developing responses to extremist exploitation of the digital space for more than a decade. And this is full spectrum extremism. So we're looking at white nationalists on one end of the spectrum, all the way to your prescribed groups, and also decentralized support groups that exist in the dozens across the vast expanse of the web. What I want to note from the onset, there are still major gaps in subject matter expertise for effective moderation of Arabic social media spaces on primary platforms such as YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook. And the companies have noted improvements in automated detection, but of course, as extremists are wont to do, they've adapted to these environments and these measures, and they will continue to adapt to these environments and these measures. So we produced a number of briefings. You can find them on our website, isdglobal.org, in regards to sort of Arabic language extremist content online on primary platforms, as well as niche and fringe platforms. I'll get more into that as we go on, as well as sort of the ideologues that exist in the digital space, sort of digital dirges that are continually put on for these ideologues, whether dead or alive. And we've also provided testimony in returning ISIS cases based on a lot of our digital research. So the first thing is understanding that you can't look at this space as just separate sort of entities. So if I look at social media on one end, I need to look at each platform differently, but I also need to understand that they're interlinked and that networks are spread across these different platforms, using them for different functions. So part of this is understanding sort of the toolbox of sort of extremist exploitation of the open web. Now, I'm not talking about the dark web. I'm talking about things that are on surface level. So standalone platforms and websites are one sort of community we need to look at. And we know extremists are running a number of these. Another one that I separate out of this band, beyond standalone platforms and websites, are digital archives, and then social media communities, and this is across a different sort of swath of platforms, and then encrypted and open source messaging applications, which of course you probably heard a lot of, and we'll hear a lot more about with Camille's excellent presentation. Now, all of these are different. So how are they different? So standalone platforms and websites are either developed by supporters, groups, or official media arms of extremist groups that host and share extremist propaganda. Digital archives are incredibly important. I'm not talking about a simple library of 5 or 6 pieces of content. I'm talking about things that have 1.8 to 5 terabytes worth of content that exist on the open web and that are easily accessible if you know the URLs. Archives host both legacy and new material produced by various arms of extremist groups, and they're sort of like the slow IV drip that feeds into everything else. Social media networks, you've heard a lot about these, but extremists often cluster in social media communities on mainstream, niche, and fringe platforms online. We'll dive more into that later. As well as they sort of build a lot of actionable insights for us in regards to digital investigations that allow us to understand these communities, whether they're broken down by groups or whether they're unofficial, you name it. And encrypted and open source messaging applications such as Telegram, Rocket Chat are central to extremist communications and often function as propaganda and recruitment hubs. Now, one of the things I need to just talk about, and I touched on it in the beginning, is sort of the adaptation of extremist groups to our moderation efforts. So what we need to understand is that when we go high tech, they go low tech, and they will continually do that because they're adapting to an environment that's continually shifting, whether it's AI and hashing databases, or whether it's actual content moderators going after sort of keywords that have come out of out of these communities. So how have they adapted? Well, first thing is two-step verification hacking. So using online phone numbers that you can get readily available, and they're often connected to real on-the-ground phone numbers, you can go to a website and say, for instance, Facebook, and say that you have lost your account and that you want your password sent to a phone number. Using these online phone numbers, what they're able to do is hack out existing users and then take control of social media accounts. This allows them a number of benefits, and we'll get more into that as we go on. Content cloaking, recognizing that AI is going after logos and branding. They're blurring, adjusting, or covering up existing extremist branding on content. Broken text posting, which is creating posts that effectively use sort of dots, punctuation, spaces, gaps, alters the way that a word looks, the use of Arabic and English in the same word, in order to get around sort of AI moderation efforts around certain keywords. Account hoarding, so using sort of the two-step verification hacking to essentially build a phalanx of digital sort of accounts that can be used if one goes down. Some can have 10, some can have hundreds, and it depends on the platform. Comment content. What they know is that comment spaces on social media platforms are relatively unmoderated. And so using that comment space to put whole videos, content such as weekly newsletters that come out via ISIS support groups, this is the prime location where they're putting a lot of content. And then social media raids, which are effectively bombing mainstream pages with extremist content. And we've seen this done on, for instance, a Facebook group for the Department of Defense in the United States, the Air Force Academy, former President Donald Trump's page, the Tour de France, as well as President Macron's page. A couple of points before we get into sort of the specifics of these sort of communities that are part of the online extremist ecosystem is thinking about COVID-19 co-option and what that looks like in this space. So centralized COVID-19 narratives by ISIS and Al-Qaeda are being shared by networks of supporters that are diffused and sort of decentralized across platforms such as Facebook and Twitter. What's happening is we're seeing a merging of what is termed Chan culture. That comes from 4chan or Reddit with traditional ISIS propaganda, producing a new sort of generation of ISIS content online, much of which draws its inspiration from video game and trolling communities. And they're functioning in a way that is completely different than the generations before them. The diffusion of ISIS networks on encrypting platforms has led to trialing new innovative and modes and methods of raiding primary social media websites and also manipulating other platforms. These are all key gaps in the ability to curtail sustained attacks across the open web and are resulting in key wins for ISIS networks online. Now, in regards to COVID specifically, we monitored some 230 accounts over a 30-day period on Twitter specifically, looking at COVID-19 hashtags to spread ISIS propaganda in the Arabic Twitter sphere. So these accounts appeared daily after takedown. So averaging about 10 new ISIS support accounts in a 12-hour time span. We saw content that praised God's soldier, Corona. Accounts targeted COVID-19 hashtags in Saudi Arabia, Lebanon, Jordan, Egypt, Iraq, Afghanistan, and Pakistan. Accounts used multilingual hashtags to create the ISIS brand trend in key regions. On sort of using this subset of 230 accounts, more than 570,000 video views over just 155 pieces of content that came from Iraq, Syria, Afghanistan, Somalia, Mozambique, and Nigeria, tagged with COVID-19 trending hashtags. About 38% of these Twitter accounts linked to key ISIS websites, media aggregators, and repositories, such as Muslim News, The Punishment, and a key ISIS digital archive. So, and they also similarly used the strategic sort of placement of Twitter ads to spread ISIS content and drown out other COVID-19 related posts. Similarly, because it's been in the news, it's important to understand the effect of the fall of Kabul and the takeover of Afghanistan by the Taliban. And more importantly, what you see on the screen in front of you, the Chadlaban. So what is the Chadlaban? So prior to and in the midst of the Taliban's push across Afghanistan, which culminated in the fall of Kabul in August, we witnessed a clear convergence between far-right and Islamist support for the Taliban. The appropriation of sort of far-right meme cultures was one feature of this convergence of narratives and imagery signaling a new dynamic online that I mentioned briefly earlier in the presentation. This includes the use of popular Chan culture, again, born out of communities on 4chan and Reddit, memes like Pepe the Frog, Giga Chad, Trollface, to speak to the Taliban victory. For instance, this video, I'll play it here only for a second, is a famous or infamous Taliban nasheed or chant that's done in English, actually. And it's used over this.
Congratulations, 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 congratulations. We're doing our operation against the occupation for elimination the operation. We're doing our operation.
And I apologize to all of your ears for that because it's horrible. On Twitter, for instance, we saw a series of emboldened far-right accounts set up Pashto-speaking agencies that sought to denigrate the U.S. military, NATO, and quote-unquote liberal Afghans. Far-right actors even launched a One Struggle campaign that featured the Taliban as heroes alongside the Confederacy, so the Civil War Confederacy, in a struggle between tradition versus modernity.
Congratulations.
Sorry. So this convergence is fueled by a sort of multi-platform and generational challenge that will become a more defining feature of online extremism in the future. Researchers at ISD already map these communities of quote-unquote alt-Islamists across platforms and are beginning to understand their core narratives, predominantly directed at Muslims and the West. They're not unified in their ideological worldview, but they are united in appropriating aesthetics from the far right. So you can see a range of that on this particular slide. With that said, I just want to get into standalone platforms and their importance to the extremist ecosystem. So we've tracked and monitored about 24 ISIS standalone websites on the surface web. These include things known as the jihadist Netflix, called The Punishment, the popular sort of Muslim news website, which is a ISIS aggregator site, Al-Anfal, which is a Spotify-like audio site, as well as archives that support and provide the necessary content to continually build these websites, and essentially their redeployment when the websites and the platforms are disrupted. Understanding this sort of network of websites is key to any sort of digital investigation someone conducts. Our research have also tracked and monitored and reported on long-standing Al-Qaeda standalone websites. While there's been a focus sort of over the years on ISIS online presence, Al-Qaeda, still the websites are operating relatively freely and are just as interlinked and connected. Most of these websites are archives continually updated in order to feed content to supporters across the open web. So one of those that we track was, or two of those that I'll talk about, is just Muslim News and The Punishment. So Muslim News, essentially in Arabic, Akhbar al-Muslimin, is essentially an aggregator site. It takes a lot of different things, and it also has archives, and it provides sort of a digital repository of all ISIS video outputs, as well as, and Camille will touch on this, is essentially sort of the official communications. The thing about Muslim News is it's the top hit out of some 17.5 million hits for Muslim News in Arabic, and is an ISIS aggregator site that has a repository of outputs, again, back to 2014. All of the content is available for download in multiple formats. And it's also important to remember that they've essentially gamified or sort of hacked search engine optimization. What we know about people when they go online and search for things is they don't go past the first 5 hits. So having a #1 hit be an ISIS website is incredibly scary thought. Part of this is also sort of radio and understanding the radio space. Of course, ISIS used to run an FM radio station called Al Bayan. They now run several streaming sites that function like Spotify and SoundCloud. These sites, much like the news and video platforms, provide users with audio content from ISIS ideologues. And I apologize, I didn't finish that sentence for some reason, as well as ISIS sort of, what is it called? Ideology lessons, I would say, Aqidah, for instance. The audio sites provide users with less without the bandwidth, the ability to download this. It still has the same radicalizing ability, I believe. These sites have been designed to provide users with a sleek user interface and the facade that they are in fact legitimate radio platforms rather than extremist content hubs. Another key part of this was these sites were actually being linked to from Wikipedia under the Al Bayan Radio Archive entry. Now, digital archives. In 2019, after the death of Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, we tracked more than 500 accounts that appeared on Twitter over a span of a week. These accounts were exhibiting really strong signs, as you can see, of automated and semi-automated behavior while tweeting out sort of ISIS propaganda, attacking other Salafi jihadist groups, reiterating al-Baghdadi's vision, and venerating the fighters within the group's ranks. We monitored the Baghdadi net, quote unquote, what we called it, accounts for 2 months, and observed about 5% of these accounts were sharing 2 short links in their bios to archives. The accounts used these short links to link specifically and get around sort of AI detection. As you can see here, they're the links. These are dead now, so you can't actually use them to access the websites. Another part of this was specifically looking at what it opened up for us. So what it opened up is essentially what we call the Cloud Caliphate or the Caliphate cache. It's an active encrypted cloud-based drive with 1.8 terabytes of ISIS content, which have been used since the group's genesis as Jam'at Tawheed wal Jihad. More than 4,000 folders and subfolders within the drive host internal training manuals, strategy documents in multiple formats such as PDFs, Word, PowerPoint presentations, and how to create chemicals, case studies such as the 9/11 hijacking, building your own arsenal and ammunition. The content in the cache is predominantly in Arabic, but it's closely followed by Spanish, English, French, and German. We've already linked its content to 2 key platforms that have been developed and redeveloped over the years to share and spread ISIS content on the dark web and in public fora. A little bit more about sort of the Caliphate cache is about roughly 6% of the drive, or about 56 gigabytes, is dedicated to group leaders, key Salafi jihadist fatwas, and the strategies that have set the tone for recruiting, developing key strategies for their groups over the course of time. There's a folder dedicated to military studies that includes the Mujahid's Bag. You've probably heard of this. It's a folder of material on urban warfare, guerrilla movements such as the Viet Cong, effective kidnapping, and surviving prison environments. We've traced the folder to a now dead Australian foreign fighter, but it's likely also traced to others. An overwhelming amount of content is video content. About roughly 72% of the cache is video content from all the various ISIS media organizations affiliated with their quote unquote controlled territory over the years. The largest video folders are Raqqa, Niwa, and Aleppo. Based on the amount of data attributed to ISIS various leadership and spiritual guides over the past few years, Anwar al-Awlaki features the most prominently in the Caliphate cache. However, that's changing all the time based on the fact it is a live, breathing sort of cloud. And followed by Awlaki is Abu Muhammad al-Adnani, the former spokesman, now dead, and Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. Who created it? So to date, we don't know who. We have inklings on who the support group behind it is, of course. The amount of metadata within the cache requires analysis on a content-to-content basis. Again, there's 4,000 folders. Within those 4,000 folders, 97,000 pieces of content. To date, we've traced the metadata of a single folder to a now dead Australian foreign fighter. The Mujahid's Bag, again, a folder of material on urban warfare, was collated by Abu Hamza Sudani based on documents reviewed. His real name was Abdul Salam al-Mahmoud, was one of 230 Australian foreign fighters who traveled to Syria. He had in fact gone to Syria twice. He began as a foot soldier in Sydney's street Dawah movement. This is only one linkage to foreign fighters and provides a snapshot of the key documents an ISIS recruiter and fighter likely read and curated as a means to enlist and ultimately train new recruits. In fact, Abu Hamza Sudani tried to join ISIS, couldn't join ISIS, so he joined the next best thing at the time, which was Nusra, and he ultimately died fighting for Nusra. Understanding sort of its archiving, it's an open source sort of filing software. like Google Documents or Dropbox, which functions as a cloud-based storage device for other users. Hosted on Cloudflare, the former hosting platform for 8chan, the really noxious white nationalist and far right site, via an open source cloud storage platform called Nextcloud. Nextcloud is, again, open source. It's also used by the German federal government as well as the French Interior Ministry. So it's not something that is essentially like under the radar. This is a thing that supports legitimate sort of cloud storage drive ability. Understanding its sort of traffic is also important for understanding where we need to put some of our efforts. About roughly 41% of the traffic to the cache comes from social media. So with YouTube and Twitter providing most of the social media platform-driven traffic, another 56 is direct access to the link. So that's whether they're getting it through Telegram, whether they're getting it from other means. The cache's primary audience comes from Egypt and Algeria. It is shifting, however. We've seen a lot of US, Netherlands, as well as Norway related traffic. And the top referral site, again, is another Islamic State linked website known as Muslim News, which I touched on briefly. Now, social media networks. So we've noted an increased use of Facebook by ISIS supporters over the past few years, after sort of failing to build significant footholds on the site, and as a primary platform to essentially disseminate official and DIY ISIS support content. ISIS networks of Kiev accounts have proliferated across the site. This includes sort of a network that we found called the Foeris Upload Network, which fanned out content to a network of hundreds of accounts, scores of pages and groups, and in several languages, the primary being Arabic. Much of the focus of the content was historical pieces of media that set the tone for the quote-unquote ISIS brand in 2015 and 2017. ISIS networks online are also exploiting the current global pandemic by setting up coronavirus pages. You can see one over there in the corner, as well as using other COVID-19 misinformation, disinformation tactics online. Users are using the platform to educate other supporters on account manipulation and masking their online footprint as well. So a little bit more on two-step verification hacking. When we were tracking this Foeris Upload network, we found a central account dubbed Luqman bin Tashafin, who shared instructional videos and posts on how to hack two-step verification. Other accounts, friends, followers of Foeris Upload Network followed suit, created their own instructional posts, and the videos that highlighted the gap, these instructions including setting up accounts on Second Line and TextNow with several emails, searching for existing Facebook users with Canadian and US phone numbers, using the Find My Account function, and then resetting the passwords and locking out existing users to spread content. And they're doing this in the tens to hundreds, depending on what sort of network you're tracking. Another part of this was content cloaking. So what we saw was essentially a mishmash of content. So taking something like a Quranic reading, a video of a Quranic reading, placing it for about 15 seconds ahead of a video, then again placing another 15 seconds of a perfectly legitimate documentary about ISIS done by Journeyman Pictures, as you can see here, and then actually launching into the Islamic State content at the 30-second mark. So everyone had a different sort of version. I say everyone, all the accounts had different sort of modus operandi for content cloaking, but this was the primary one that we saw and continue to see to this day. Another part of this was broken text posting, which is sort of evading detection, whether it's AI or moderation. And the posting tactic involves placing, you can see here, dots or spaces. Similarly, again, content cloaking, you can see the emojis laid over a video. And this is stymies mechanisms that would generally read these automatically. So if I'm reading for certain text, what it does is it messes up the ability to read it, and then it doesn't get flagged. So you mask words like fighter, caliphate, or specific names of ISIS releases. You also use specialized fonts to attempt to mask problematic language. This sometimes can be coupled with content cloaking. And it means to provide two forms of quote unquote protection. And then calling card avatar accounts. So once you've hacked all these accounts, you want people to know that this is an ISIS account. Generally, that's how ISIS accounts operate. And so what we saw is a number of sort of micro networks spread across Facebook. And so they're using, for instance, the Solid Snake character from Metal Gear Solid attaching sort of an ISIS bandana, and then sort of the gateway to ISIS-controlled territory as a backdrop. We saw the same with other sort of accounts that you can see below, using foreign fighter avatars as a calling card. This means that you're signaling to other ISIS accounts that you should connect with me, we can share, so on and so forth. And then comment content, which I touched on briefly. This is using the comment space to effectively put in full-length ISIS videos where they know it's an unregulated space. They do the same with a Nebat newsletter, as well as posts broken down by wilayat with official news bulletins of attacks, assassinations, and snatch and grabs, quote-unquote, war spoils. Select accounts are using signposting to their encrypted messaging platform. So again, Telegram channels and groups, much less to ISIS-linked WhatsApp groups. Researchers found, for instance, Beit al-Maqdis WhatsApp groups were the most peddled form of WhatsApp groups in these spaces. And then last but not least, sort of raids. So what is a raid? So from a period of March to July 2020, we found 4 Roma pages. What is Roma? Roma is sort of a decentralized, however coordinated group of ISIS supporters that spread off across Facebook. And what they do is they plan quote unquote attacks or raids on other Facebook groups and pages. They keep altering their logo and page names to avoid detection. It's an outlet that gets its official sort of name from ISIS magazine Umia, and of course jihadists have this perennial sort of feeling that at any point they're going to sack Rome, and so that's where they derive their name. And is a supporter-linked social media manifestation that does not have standalone outputs, even though recently they put out a 2.5-hour-long film that was horribly edited and really subpar. So I don't imagine a lot of people are watching it. However, they are effective in drowning out other people in the comment spaces. So they've targeted, for instance, US President Trump, which I touched on, Egyptian Armed Forces, French Armed Forces, US Air Force Academy, with tons of content, including even activists. So someone who sits on Facebook's oversight board, they targeted Tawakkul Karman's page, Nobel Peace Prize winner, with tons of ISIS content, which you can see here. In Lebanon, where things are really tense, they even targeted with specific directives to kill Shia. And most of the time they were focused on that sort of schism and promoting that schism, even to this day. And last but not least, I'm going to touch on briefly, because my fellow panelists will get really in depth with this, encrypted and open source messaging applications. So Europol conducted one of the largest operations against ISIS channels on encrypted platforms, specifically Telegram and other platforms, removing some 26,000 pieces of content in 2019. Telegram has long been at the center of ISIS propaganda operations online, primarily due to its enhanced privacy. Telegram offers what is called, quote unquote, end-to-end encryption, service that ensures that no one other than the sender or receiver of the message can access the message. However, that's shifting. The application also offers secret chat rooms and messages that self-destruct. So obviously these places are incredibly important for them. These functions make the application a key platform for ISIS, as well as Al-Qaeda supporters, as well as media arms that disseminate propaganda for the groups. So for instance, the archive I talked about has a corresponding bot that exists on Telegram that provides you with links and access to the actual archive. And then last but not least, I just want to touch a little bit on Al-Qaeda's strategy, which is different. I mean, all support groups even have different strategies. Al-Qaeda's communication is a range of sort of encrypted and open source messaging applications. For instance, the Al-Qaeda linked Global Media Islamic Front, the group has sort of a multifaceted media presence online. Central to that presence is its Rocket Chat. On Rocket Chat, the application is what is commonly known as it's commonly known as open source, meaning that the code is built, it is not private and can be changed by its users. So ultimately, you can change the code to your liking. Users also own their data, which means the platform does not store or keep the data affiliated with its usage. This appeals to extremist supporters and groups because, once again, the privacy of the platform. And what you can see here is that, I mean, Qaeda has a range of different channels on Rocket Chat, and it's actually spreading to other platforms that are open source that are specifically for messaging, like Matrix or Riot and Element. And with that, come to a close, and thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Mustafa, for laying out. This is such a complex arena with such different usages and so on, and different platforms and different evasion techniques and so on. I think we're not going to take questions now, but we're going to save those. Please, I urge you all to write questions. There will be room for Q&A later. So please ask your questions via the Q&A section, which is at the bottom right of your screen, and then click on the 3 dots to open up the Q&A. We just written that in the chat. So please ask your questions, and then we'll take those at a later stage. It's a perfect tee for Camille Antunes for really outlining, how do you do this? How do you deal with this space if you're law enforcement, and how do you assess the threat? How do you assess the way in which the actors have communicated and so on? So Camille, without any further ado, we are delighted that you could join us. I believe you are not at Europol headquarters, but at some other undisclosed location. We hope the technology will function, but please, the floor is yours.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you, yes.
Okay, good. So yeah, thank you very much for having me this afternoon, and I hope that I will complement the fantastic presentation from Mustafa. Sorry?
Camille, may I just interrupt you? Maybe Ron's staff can put up the presentation. Because
I have the presentation for me. Wait a second.
Yes.
From here? Can you see my
Sorry.
presentation?
Oh, yes. Sorry about that. Please go ahead.
Yeah?
Yes.
Okay. So, yeah. So I hope that what I will touch upon will be explanatory and complement what Mustafa very brilliantly described. So the phenomenon and the tactics and trends that they use for avoiding detection are our primary concern. So the EU-IRU referral unit within the Counterterrorism Center at Europol has 2 mandates. One from delivered by the Commission. One of our key role is to support member states' investigation in attributing the online environment users that are spreading the propaganda or using it in order to plan attacks in Europe. And the second mandate that we have is to refer to the online industry the terrorist online content that is spread on their platform, for them to review it against their terms and conditions and decide to host it from their platform or not. So our unit has the capacity to assess the content, and we try to make sense of it, and we try to compose with the trends and tactics that Mustafa just described. The challenges for us is to identify the people behind that and to try to tackle the content and identify the people behind. So I want to go through a very concrete example of how we try to do that, with coming back to the operation that we coordinated on behalf of the member states in November 2019. We did a massive referral action day. In fact, it's not one day, but it was 2 years of preparation and multiple weeks of sustained effort to maintain the referral and be sure to denest ISIS official network on the platform Telegram. How it started? It started, in fact, in 2015. ISIS in 2014 built a very efficient asset to serve their communication strategy called Amak News Agency. It's a pivotal asset for them because it allowed them to give another perspective to their followers regarding their activity on the ground. And it was a major step in their communication strategy by mimicking the kind of product that our mainstream media are doing to report on their activity and giving legitimacy to their, at that time, statehood strategy, building the Caliphate and having an agency like Amak News Agency reporting on them, giving them the dimension of a nation state on internet. Amak News Agency was producing a lot of pieces of propaganda on a daily basis. Like an external news agency will report on the activity and the events that happen in a country. And they were flooding the internet with their breaking news or report or video report on the activities of ISIS fighter on the ground. This media outlet still exists, but at that time in 2016, it took a major importance because it was largely relayed by our mainstream media as a real source of information regarding ISIS. And soon Amak News Agency and the other official media outlet of the Islamic State became primary source of information for our mainstream media, furthering therefore the message of the terrorist group in our news. So it was a brilliant way of flooding the internet. And the problem for us was that Amak was the main mouthpiece that the terrorist group was using, following the military strategy of inciting people to join ISIS military organization remotely, not joining them in the Sham or in the controlled territory of the so-called Caliphate at that time, but by operating for ISIS in the land of this or their enemy. And Amak gave the link to bridge the attacker with the organization, even though there were no direct organic link. It was an online link that we needed to tackle in order to prevent the possibility for wannabe jihadist or radicalized individual to claim this link, and for ISIS to capitalize on those people that wanted to commit attack or committed attack in our countries. So we started to map the brilliant infrastructure of Amak News Agency at that time. They launched an application, mobile application for Android in 2015, December 2015. So we started by mapping that. We mapped also their web blog and all the range of servers that they had to host the content. And we supported the member states to tackle one by one those servers. So when in 2016, one of the operation was aiming to disrupt the mobile application and the server of their unique website at that time, they adapted and they recreate a pool of server hosting their propaganda and staying resilient online. So they build this resilient infrastructure, and every time we try to go to the basis of this hosting, they were recreating a new way of hosting the content, moving to more technologically advanced way of putting anonymization on their server, spreading their server in multiple companies that couldn't be at reach of the law enforcement agencies or are not cooperative with law enforcement agencies. And we tackled the phenomenon, trying to tackle, in fact, their statehood strategy. Being resilient, being stable online was also a statement for them to say that they are an international actor that counts. They also faced the problem in the battlefield, like they faced the problem online. If they were tackled by the coalition on the ground, they were also tackled by law enforcement online, and they had to build their resistance differently. So they had to shape also their message. When we coordinated the operation in 2017 and 2018, they were forced to merge their way of communication. So from having AMAC in a specific server and disseminating the rest of the branding media outlet like Al Bayan Radio or the others in other instances and infrastructure, they had to merge because they needed to rationalize their means. Also, the tackling on the ground by the coalition were forcing them to move where they will not have the same access to internet or the same way of procuring their server and being sure that they will stay resilient online. So there is some kind of a mirror of the way that law enforcement is trying to tackle the phenomena in the battlefield, whereas the battlefield is off or online. In 2017, they had to merge all their media outlets under the same infrastructure, and this is at that time that we saw the appearance a little bit before, but the merging and the predominant presence of National News Agency. It's brilliant way of communicating because they followed what we are doing again with our media. So if AMAC was a standalone at some point, they had to merge the production of AMAC with the rest of their official production under the 24/7 concept of channel that are also blooming in our Western societies for channeling all type of production that they had. So they merge everything under the banner of National News 24/7 information channels, and because they couldn't pretend to have the stability of a nation state anymore, they had also to build another narrative around that. Passing from having everything hosted in infrastructure that kept on being tackled by operations online, they had to find another way to avoid being targeted. So they invested a lot into the social media in the past, but they needed a resilient infrastructure hosted elsewhere than in classic, let's say, telecommunication grounded infrastructure, and they completely nested in Telegram to have this possibility to have this 24/7 channel available for all their supporters or people looking for their content, and they mastered the way of using the feature of the platform, and they give them a new narrative being again, well, it's one of the narratives that they favor, the victimization, but building it as a glory, as a jihadi subculture, as we like to somehow name it, in a messaging app, giving the feeling for their followers to be chased, to have a feeling of belonging. So they always adapt what they use as an infrastructure or as the platforms that they are abusing to also the narrative that they have, and also the production is shaped in this way. So National News was nested in Telegram, and they were very difficult to remove. So our cap of prevention for the referral activity to the platform started with Telegram a long time ago, but we needed to bring more awareness, and we developed further our communication and our cooperation with the platform on the basis of the referral activity. So National News was there to galvanize the online jihadi subculture. It was important to increase the feeling of belonging, and it's also answering the question of our nowadays society about the frustration and the democratization of the news. We know that nowadays there is a rising voice of people that are following defiance somehow as an ideology. ISIS media operatives knows that, and they adapt to that. Being on the messaging application for hosting the core central message of the group was answering also to this frustration. So with the merging of all their publication in national news channel, 24/7 channels in Telegram. We needed to do something, and so because we have this cap of referral, we build with the member states an operation that was aiming to denest them from there and maybe bring them to platforms that will be maybe more cooperative with law enforcement and judicial orders in order to help us to attribute and to identify the people behind this structure. So we studied the dissemination process following the main piece of ISIS propaganda that is issued weekly. I'm sorry for the marking is no longer restricted. It's publicly available information. So we followed the dissemination process, following first their weekly issue, Al-Naba magazine, which is sharp, coming out between Thursday and Friday every week. It's the magazine that summarized basically the activity of the week, and the way that the dissemination process was doing. We studied it for 2 years, and it helped us to map how and where to tackle and where we could then grab information that will be helpful to identify the people behind. So we studied the process. Naba was appearing first on Telegram Nashir private channel. So we get the range of those channels, changing every week, trying to map which one was in, which one was down. And then we saw that the dissemination was going then from those private channels forwarding in public channels. We followed it then from the Nashir instances, the one-way communication of ISIS propaganda, to the supportive networks on the platform. And then seeing that from there it was going in other platforms. Mustafa was touching upon the abuse of social media. We followed this process in Telegram where we couldn't outreach the platform with judicial order, to platforms where we could actually have cooperation on the judicial level to identify and to have more information. So we followed them, and we saw the dissemination process going to those social media platforms was very interesting for us. Then to the supportive website like Akbar al-Muslimin that was mentioned by Mustafa, but also Come to Success News, or this kind of repository that are very important for supplying the dissemination process and keeping it vivid and online and resilient. And then to decentralized platform like Rocket Chat and the server of Rocket Chat Tech Haven that is manipulated by ISIS media operative to stay resilient online, and then back to a new process. Everything was always having some kind of an externalization of it, and as Mustafa was saying, what we call file sharing platforms are very important for them to have the pieces seeded somewhere and being able to disseminate it. By the time that we do referral of all this chain of dissemination, they have already put it back up somewhere, or their supporters do that for them. So we prioritized the disruption, and we decided that to tackle, we had to go to the very origin of the dissemination. So we prioritized first the Nashir network in Telegram, then the ecosystem in Telegram, and then going for the what we call external repository or supportive website to the extent that we can reach, because some of them having many layers of anonymity or being self-hosted will be impenetrable for us. So we followed the URS from those file sharing platforms and try to track them into all those silos, as we like to call them, to do an OSINT and to be sure to investigate who could be behind, identified when we didn't have the occasion to actually serve a subpoena to get the data behind. So because it was mainly focused on Telegram that do not receive judicial requests from law enforcement and judicial authorities, we decided to push them out of Telegram to be able to grab information from the others repository when it's possible. So we tracked the URL through those silos and try to find the occasion on the momentum, on the go of the dissemination process of Al-Naba between a Thursday and Friday evening, and trying to catch the information on the go and being able also to shut down the channels that they were using. At the end, we referred 26,000 pieces of content that were spread through Nashir News Telegram channels, but in total is more than 200,000 identifiers, including channels, groups, and users that were hosted from Telegram. On top of it, we provided also Telegram with knowledge on how to tackle, and it was mentioned also by Mustafa, it was very important for us to bring awareness toward all the industry, in fact, not only Telegram, but all those platforms that were abused by this modus operandi, to be aware of the branding. Part of our battle is also to counter this normalization of the propaganda being viewed and seen because of the branding as a regular media outlet, even though they are propaganda and they are therefore based on what we can call as biased news or disinformation or fake news, but just propaganda being the message for the political agenda online. So we also provided what we call some kind of a knowledge package for the industry to be able to detect the logo. And this is what Mustafa was saying. They are always very keen in adapting, and we have to produce this kind of knowledge package for the platforms that are responsive to the referral on a quarterly, bi-monthly basis, because they create a tremendous amount of branding and it catch the attention very fast. In fact, the media operative, most of them have either media or technical background, and they know how to master the strategies of communication to further message and to be catchy. So after the referral action day in November 2019, we had new challenges. If they were on Telegram and we were able to follow them very easily on a daily basis, after pushing them out of Telegram, we had to adapt and to focus on what was the new environment. We kept on doing referral, high intensity referral until January 2020, and then we started to observe a kind of new stability in what we call now the multi-platform environment that is abused by the group, where Telegram has a role, but it's not the same role as before, also because they have found other way not to be detected and to be resilient, and they are now mastering the variety of platforms that are an option for any kind of citizen, but a very good option for them. So the challenges today for us is to assess the threat and to attribute in this new environment. So there is the part of the threat assessment for us is very difficult because now they don't have the branding that is that was the common one, but most of the branding is coming from the supportive network next to them, and there is we observe a mushrooming, what we call a mushrooming of a media outlet managed by probably the same online personas, a bunch of online personas that appear as ringers in most of the city cases that we are supporting for the member states, and are now handling tons and tons of media outlets, one being up one week, another week, few of them being mentioned now on the PowerPoint, like At-Taqwa or Amdal Ansar, that are up this week, and next week will be Al-Mahdi and Sunni Shield Foundation. So they are doing this mushrooming of media outlets that help them to stay resilient and force us to bring more and more awareness toward the platforms. They are using the quick win. So they multiply the posters, the banners, what is very easy and quick to develop, the posters, the banners, the low quality. Mustafa was touching upon the meme culture and all these kind of very quick, efficient messages. They are very doing that, and it's more and more difficult maybe to catch an ideological message there, but the message per se is the dissemination of being ISIS online, and it's an information warfare that is a physical presence online somehow. An online presence, very steady online presence, is the message of the group nowadays. Repeated threat against the member states more and more. In the past, when they had more time to develop the pieces, they were bringing more and more ideology or how to manual, brochure, whatever, to explain how to pray, how to raise your kid, how to train yourself. Nowadays is really like very quick win, threat, antagonization of other groups, etc., with very low quality pieces or very efficient posters, such as the one that I put there just for a mini illustration. The other very important challenge for us is the attribution, also identifying who are those people. And so within the new what we call the deplatformization, the multi-platform environment, they are mostly hosted either for propaganda or for direct communication with the wannabe jihadists or people that could be triggered for committing attack in our countries within those platforms. So Telegram and OOP for the features that I mentioned for National News Agency, possibility of having channels, one-way communication, but also private communication as they are messaging application. They are using encrypted messaging application like Conversation that has several instances that they are abusing. Elements that nowadays is using the protocol CoffeeSpot and Matrix.org before. Those kind of encrypted platform are favored either for transfer of data of wannabe propagandists or people that would like to get knowledges, or for private communication. And Trima, that is a paid application as well, which is another level of engagement for the people that we investigate. Then you have what we call decentralized platforms such as TechHaven, so TechHaven being ISIS repository server procured by ISIS supportive network and not the official media department, and is acting as a repository, a daily feed, compensating the loss that they had with the Telegram channel and possibility to disseminate their content like a 24/7 channel. TechHaven is doing that for them in a very more resilient way. Then you have those websites that Mustafa touched upon, such as Elocab, The Punishment, the Netflix-like platform. Last week they announced the possibility of having a new one called directly Jihad Flix. We didn't see it or the premises, or we didn't study the process yet, but it's something, a modus operandi that is very favored, and especially since they do not have no longer their pool of channel in Telegram, or not able to keep their pool of channel on Telegram. The file sharing platform like Archive or FileFM, just paste it, many others that are using to seed the content, the PDF, the photo, the whatever, and then putting those links in those applications that I mentioned. And more recently, a regain of attraction for the gaming and gaming adjacent platforms such as Twitch or Discord that were mostly used for one-to-one trigger, and now we see more and more feed like 24/7 channels in those applications that are adjacent to the gaming platforms, and it's of high concern for us. So some of the platforms, because of our preventive care and our awareness, let's say, discussion with the online industry, are reachable for us. For the referral activity, for the attribution, it's even more complicated sometimes. Some of them are untouchable because directly built, anonymized, run, procured by the jihadists themselves. Others because they are reluctant to cooperate with the law enforcement agency, beside the referral activity that is mostly accepted by the online industry in its whole. But this is, one of the main challenge for us, following them in all those platforms, understanding which platform is used for what and what is the next platform, because they adapt, they evolve, and they jump to the next one very easily according to the operational need that they have to seed, to host, to disseminate, to make a new statement, to launch a new campaign. Today, a bunch of people are responsible for compensating what is happening, what happened in November 2019. So we call them ISIS core disseminator. They are pivotal to the activity of ISIS. They are extremely tech-savvy. They know how to reshuffle, reproduce the propaganda. So just to give you a quick example, with the Vienna attack last year in November 2020, after AMAC issued the photo report and the statement, the claim by ISIS in Telegram and in OOP, it was then found in Tech Haven, reshaped, remoduled, rebranded, and then in again Tech Haven, but under another media outlet. So they are mastering this reshuffling, this all new branding, quick win, a lot of posters that were using directly the image from the self-generated claim of the perpetrator. And they are very compensating this between the link between that exists before between AMAC and the ISIS command. It's now supported by this ring of core disseminator that navigate the people in between the platforms and help ISIS to stay resistant online, win the battle by, in fact, ensuring more, in our assessment, more than 80% of what is related to ISIS online nowadays. So, as I mentioned, two stream, two strategy, two goals. The one of the official line, they keep on using AMAC, the weekly magazine, but they had to reshape their message because they don't have the stronghold on the ground that they had before. So they focus where they have a real insurgency, where they can report on, like in Africa, where they have ISIS-affiliated fighters still on the ground and reporting to ISIS media, official media operatives. In Khorasan, like we saw recently in Afghanistan, multiplication of claims, giving the emphasis on what is actually the Caliphate, again, the so-called Caliphate, doing on the ground as a weighted actor on the international scene to have an impact on our political agenda, forcing us to take measures. Either it will be a new terrorist content online regulation appearing next year, or a preventive measure that will be implemented in a country that is targeting by ISIS or being part of the enemy of ISIS. And then the core disseminators, amplifying the external operational agenda, trying to galvanize the supporters, bringing them to get the latest information of ISIS, to conduct the jihad by the tongue, or to be ready, informed, and to coordinate for carrying attack on behalf of the terrorist organization. So for us, those are the main challenges following the propaganda, following the communication process, trying to identify where they are, why they use what. The main challenge is the collection for us of e-evidence through this multi-platform environment. It's important for us to be able to tackle the phenomena using the referral activity, but as law enforcement agency, for us, the idea is to identify the people behind and prevent attacks on our countries. The problem is also the judiciarization of this data collected. The pedagogy and the jurisprudence is always very important for us to bring awareness not only to the industry but also to the judicial authorities. So how do we use those evidence? How do we connect the dots between the person who is hosting a piece of propaganda on his computer and actually the motive of ISIS? How do we explain that conducting the jihad by the tongue can be by sending a tweet or hacking the Twitter account of someone for the purpose of dissemination later? All those concepts are very difficult for us to further, and it comes with investigation, and every investigation brings a new platform, a new feature to assess, a new way of judiciarization for the data. Another is the adaptation of Another challenge is the adaptation in between all of that. For each of them, for us, requires to assess the feature, to assess what is the modus operandi, if this modus operandi is serving the operational agenda, how our citizens will be impacted by that, either by viewing it or how our wannabe jihadists can supply this ring either for communication or for action, and where we can actually grab information, grab e-evidence, and pursuing the people under the rule of law. And then finally, one of our main concerns is also the media amplification. The more ISIS succeed in its communication strategy, the more our mainstream media are amplifying what is happening, and they know how to get our attention. They got it, and we saw that in particular with the recent events in Afghanistan, and how if, for example, ISIS media outlets such as Amaq were publishing the claim, and it was seen in all those platforms that are presented to you something like 200, 300 times by ISIS supporters on the platform that they abuse. It was seen at least 16,000 times on Twitter in less than an hour after the attack. The official claim of Amaq was reproduced by our mainstream media, way more than in those circles of the jihadi. And this is something that we are now trying to also assess and try to see how we can be more informative, how we can provide more information from the law enforcement perspective for the mainstream media, to avoid relaying what is actually the message and the operational agenda of those groups.
Thank you so much,
that's also
Camille, and everyone, and also Mustafa, for all the opening up our world to this incredible social media archipelago. We have a number of different questions. We have limited time, unfortunately, but I just want to sort of start off with sort of asking you in terms of what's the scale of this in terms of visitors to these sites that you've been talking about, both in Europe. For you, Camille, in terms of, how many prosecutions are you able, or takedowns are you able to bring to bear? But also, what are you seeing, Mustafa, in relation to what's the scale of this thing? It's difficult to assess, of course, but when we talk about all these sort of different platforms and sites, how many people are interfacing with this, etc. That gives us a bit of a sense of what are the challenges that we are facing.
I don't know if Camille wants to go first on this question. Camille? Okay.
Physical person.
Okay.
That's why.
Thanks.
Yeah.
So
Can
just
you
a little
hear?
bit. Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay.
Just a
No,
little
if
bit.
if you heard what I was saying just before.
No, I didn't.
Okay, I was just saying that one online persona doesn't mean one person. Can be multiple person activating one online persona, and it can be one person, physical person activating hundreds of online persona. So the count that we can have from the online perspective is not actually one person per one account. We don't know. But I can say, for example, to give you some raw information, first of all, platforms like TechHaven has more than 5,000 members, but we know actually that out of the 5,000, maybe the scale is not 5,000 persons using it worldwide. For Telegram can be the same. You have a phone number, you hack a phone number to create a new account. You can have an account on the platform. What we see on a daily basis is the view of the pieces, and this is still attractive for the people. We have multiple cases that are contributed to Europol for support. There is no city cases without a trace of propaganda today in our sphere. Every persons that is arrested on suspicion of committing a terrorist activity on our ground has an online trace in all of those platforms or in one of those platforms. So it's worrying for us, and this is why we keep on having that. But we need to keep in mind that one online persona is not one physical person. One physical person can be tons of online persona.
Super. Mustafa, briefly about the scale of this thing.
Yeah, so I can talk a little bit about website traffic and using sort of website analytics to sort of look at traffic into these websites. So for instance, if we take one example, which is that cloud Caliphate, essentially what we see is over the past 3 months, about 163,000 visitors into that website. And so a monthly breakdown of that is roughly about 54,000 hits to that website. Monthly unique is about 23,000. And visit durations are very high. So we're talking about 15 and a half minutes on average, visiting up to 19, 20 pages per visit. And based on where a majority of those IP addresses are coming from, the top ranking one into that archive is Germany, which assumes, I think, because of the group that is around it, it also uses a German chat, German sort of, I guess it's an open source chat called Drager. I don't know how to pronounce it. And then similarly, traffic coming in from Egypt, Morocco, and the Netherlands at a lower sort of rate. Other websites have smaller amounts, so you're looking at things between 6,000 to 20,000 monthly into these other websites. And we once looked at the website traffic and referral traffic actually to an Al-Qaeda website and found that it was 100% of the traffic was coming in from a gaming website that is affiliated with a white supremacist by the name of Andrew Aglin. And so that website was actually funneling a lot of traffic into the Al-Qaeda website. Okay,
so we have limited time to go through the different questions that are coming in on the Q&A. This one is for you, Mustafa. Thank you for your presentation. I would like to know whether you have conducted a collection of key themes that are promoted by Islamist extremists in 2020 and 2021. It would be really good to know how their discourse has evolved after the pandemic. So what is the discourse now that you have been seeing? I know you answered some of them, but maybe you just want to sort of unpack that a little bit.
I mean, there's tons of sort of different narratives. We have to remember that on a day-to-day basis, the official narratives are around attacks, right? And then attacks are then contextualized by sort of decentralized networks of supporters for a given region. So you've got, for instance, pockets of Swahili support for the Islamic State on Facebook. Those narratives are primarily geared towards denunciating al-Shabaab as another Salafi jihadist group, as well as the various states involved in counterterrorism in the East Africa region. They also similarly get into things like Sharia, the Sharia from the sort of framework of ISIS, which varies per ideologue. And so you can even get into a breakdown of wanting to look at, for instance, the differences between someone who is a ardent follower of let's say Anwar Awlaki versus someone who is a ardent follower of, let's say, Abu Ali al-Anbari. These are different frames of thought of thinking about how Salafi jihadist groups should operate and how to interpret Sharia based on the way that they are seeing it. So I don't have enough time to go into Sharia. I don't have enough time to go into the various narrative strands. It would take up a couple days if we wanted to do that. And I would bring in people to help me along that process in order to also give it a bit more richness and context.
Well, maybe we should have a sort of second follow-on seminar on this issue, because it's having an hour and a half on this topic is quite amazing how much ground you have covered already. This is a question for Camille. How is Europol addressing recruitment of children and teenagers in the EU? AQ and Daesh have different MO on these, as they are using video games infiltration. So children and teenagers in the EU are actively involved in video games. And there are lots of different ways in which children and teenagers' views are adapting or growing up in life. How are they exploiting this?
So the gaming industry is one place where they could recruit somehow. I think that ISIS mastered the narrative around the kids back in the good old days when they had massive production of propaganda. They were focusing either on the educational material that they can provide to the parents of the children that are radicalized individuals and want to raise their kids in a specific way. In fact, this is one of the main process. The radicalization of kids pass through the family rather than through the online space. When it's through the online space, they will go for effectively the gaming platform is one thing. The other thing will be to go in hijacking content that could be very attractive for kids. We referred video of Peppa Pig being customized with actually Osama bin Laden going on a tower. They will try to produce this kind of things to targeting the kids. In fact, the gaming industry and the targets that they would like to have outside of the family that they are already outreach and gain to their cause is mostly the young adults, the one that can be operatives, physical operatives of what they are doing. So the gaming platform are mostly not for, let's say, children, but more for teenagers and young adults with seeking for identity or for community, for belonging, and the gaming platform offer this ideal environment. The adjacent platforms like Discord and Twitch that I touched upon are one of them. It's the same for the realm of the right-winger. It's a very practical way. In the past, they were using also Sony PSP way of communicating for this. Recruitment goes from there, but recruitment goes also when you have already some kind of curiosity. You don't nowadays fall upon those media or this production. You have to look for it basically, or you are following the work of the media or the researcher, and you get attracted because you have any grievance also against where you are actually living. So the recruitment goes through the presence, goes through those kind of specific application where targeting the people that can be actually operative for them, and sometimes hijacking some content and to create a new idea in this realm.
Super. We have time for one more question, and this is from Mats Bjur. And the question is, this seminar is focused on reactive actions, which is impressive work. What can be said about proactive work in educating people from these fictional religious stories and preventing people from religious indoctrination? I mean, what can we do on a more, in terms of the narrative that is being projected and so on, rather than the impressive work that's being done now, but it seems like the scale that is needed is going to be difficult. So how do we counter this on the online sphere?
So, I mean, there's no one size fits all strategy. You have to look at these communities differently. They're using different platforms for different functions, different narratives on these different platforms as well. So it really depends on what you're attempting to do. If it's to disrupt, obviously, Europol is doing an excellent job of disrupting Telegram. And you can see that by their sort of diffusion onto other platforms and then them getting kicked off of those platforms and finding a unstable sort of footing in places. However, one of the key things is looking beyond just simply religious messaging. We can't just focus on religious messaging. Much of this is socio-political. So you have to deal with the issues that are important and real, not just perceived grievances. There are real grievances that we need to be able to address and have honest conversations with, whether it's those that we think are on the pathway to radicalization or those who are already radicalized. Because we have to admit, just as they have to admit, that they're wrong, like on things. And until we can have that open conversation, I don't think we're going to succeed in sort of proactive communications. And you can do whatever you want around sort of a counter narrative strategy. But as far as I'm concerned, counter narratives are dead. We're looking at how can we present them with real narratives? What is the real narrative that we are using to challenge these groups, whether it's on a narrative of killing other Muslims, whether it's a narrative on their attacks in the West and what it means to be a Muslim in the West. We need to be better at sort of presenting our comm strategy and understanding the landscape. That's it.
Super. Thank you, Mustafa. And Camille, do you have any thoughts about this?
Yeah, I think one of the key is also the way we communicate. So for us, from our side, from the law enforcement perspective, it's important that we communicate more with the citizens for avoiding conspirational information that could spread, because there is not enough transparency in our job on how we do, without jeopardizing our investigations or our prevention tactics or study of the modus operandi and being sure of what we do. In terms of counter narrative, there is also the perspective that we need to have somehow responsibilities in the way that we reproduce what is said or what is actual information, fact-checking, not reproducing the propaganda without actually doing the fact-checking work. And for us, from let's say the governmental institution, to be more clear and open on what is happening and explaining. But we have to say that the way that medias are built today, the real need for quick consumption of information doesn't help big, strong and grounded elephant of institution to be able to communicate as fast as they do. But it's really important for us to also catch this momentum of being more explanatory on what is the action of the governments and why those grievances are built. They are built on the lack of communication.
Well, on those wise words, time is up. It's have been an incredibly fact-filled hour and a half. This has been another important RAN webinar. We have many of these, so please visit our website, and I hope you've enjoyed today. I want to thank our speakers, Camille and Mustafa. for their fantastic, excellent presentations. Please also visit ISD, Institute for Strategic Dialogue, and Europol. And we're very impressed with the quality that you're both producing. We're happy that you're working where you are working. And we hope you have enjoyed this seminar for all of you who have been listening. So thank you for joining us. Please join us for the future. And I also want to remind all participants to fill in the survey, of which the link is shared in the chat and will appear upon closing of the seminar. This is quite important because we get a lot of feedback. And lastly, I want to thank the staff of RAN who's been behind this, who has done an excellent job in organizing this. So thank you to the entire RAN team. And please watch our space for future events. So with that, I will close the seminar. Thank you.